Welcome everyone. This is Bob and Barnes' second Q&A. Ba-ba-da-ba-da. Let's hope it goes well. And today I introduce myself to my left. I have Paul Bob Arnold, and we have our first patron guest. Below us we have Kevin. Kevin, is it Was? Vas? How do you pronounce your surname?
Was.
Was. There we go. I got it right third time. Right. So Kevin Was is joining us for today's Q&A. So after that, I think we're going to just discuss. Kevin posted a few questions for us. We'll then cover what we did last time, talk a little about anecdotes. I think something Bob suggested we do talk today is about useful tips for freelancers. Why should they pick you? And thinking outside the box. I think that's today's subject of conversation. So with that in mind, I would say over to Bob and let's kick off.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Kevin, for the first time. Hopefully,
Indeed.
the first time of many. We got your questions from the Patreon page, and if you want, we can dive straight in and do that.
Absolutely.
What you wrote, first of all, was we know that writing for medieval was a different affair to most media these days, which is true. You found some sounds, wrote some brilliant tunes, thank you, and the gang chose appropriately for each level. That is exactly what happened, because it was with the game development, it's kind of all done on the fly. It's all done as you go along, and lots of things get changed along the way as well. So you can't really trust the initial design document and think that it's all going to be like that by the time you get to the end, because you can be sure it will change quite demonstrably, and levels.
I'm gonna dive in now. So I interrupt you and say there's one thing I would say now that we kind of juggle between film and TV and games. The one thing I would say about the games industry is you can be sure it's not going to be the same as when you started. And in fact, TV and film is pretty much the case. And in fact, all I would say is that in film, hopefully what happens is they like what you do and they ask you to write more. But the film itself won't change. The same with the TV show. It won't really change. They might edit a few shots in and like that, but ultimately the show, an hour-long show is going to be an hour-long show, and the amount of music is going to be fairly simple. But with their game, it could change demonstrably, not only in the time frames that you're working on. Like Medieval is a good example. The latest Medieval was supposed to be finished. I think we were supposed to finish it in September, October 2018. So actually, best part of a year before we actually finished it. And in some cases, that's actually quite good. But game development is unfortunately a beast unto its own. Where there were so many problems to deal with in terms of not only technological ones, but creative ones, where they actually, by the time you actually skinned the level and played it through, you go, yeah, it's not great, is it really? Maybe we should ditch that one and do something else. And so it's a constantly evolving beast. So I'll say, to sum up, it's the one industry where you can never be entirely sure the amount of time you're going to spend on it, how much content you're going to write, and the game itself. It could change demonstrably from where you started to where it ends up.
Yeah.
Interruption over. Back to Bob.
But to continue with the rest of the question, because he said nowadays it's more demanding that one writes to format or a guide or even a temp track. How has your process writing for TV, movies, games, cutscenes developed, and what inspires when writing to picture? I guess we should answer that a little bit first, because our process really has changed a lot, and it's changed for a number of different reasons, and we'll sort of go through them one by one. The first one was we were writing the music initially for probably one of the first big projects we did was Primal when we went freelance back in 2001, and they had loads of cutscenes in that, which obviously were non-interactive and always going to be played back in the same way. So it was just a straightforward sound to picture job. When we started scoring those, we were doing it in a very basic way. We had the movies, we had them in our session, and we were just looking at the picture and writing something kind of appropriate, which, sounds fairly straightforward. And at the same time, we worked on a short film called Palos. It was a friend of ours. His mate was a Spanish director, and he'd made the short film, and we'd agreed to score it. And I showed it to an old housemate of mine, just happens by total coincidence to also be a film and TV composer, a guy called Michael Price. He'd done the music for Sherlock Holmes, Unforgotten. He's worked on James Bond scores. I mean, just pure chance. I moved into a shared house in Cambridge, and he was living there. Just absolutely random. Anyway, I showed it to him because I was curious to know what he thought. And I must admit, you know, I was feeling slightly overconfident maybe in the fact that I thought I'd really nailed it and thematically it was right and whatever. And Michael kind of shook me to my core by being brutally honest. And he said, really nice music, looks like library music though. And what? I mean, I sat here with the picture and I tried to work it. And he said a few very, very insightful things during that
Can I
moment.
interrupt and say maybe it's worth explaining what that means? People who don't know what library music is.
Library music. Well, library music is music not written for that purpose. You know, it's written to effectively go into a library, and then editors all over the world listen to the library, and if they think they can adapt it or make it suitable to their picture, then they do. But it's not written for purpose. That's the key thing. Anyway, as I was kind of as he started explaining, it all made sense. He said, what it looks to me like you've done is you've written a theme and you've taken it and just plonked it on the timeline. And that was exactly what I'd done. So he'd completely predicted what I'd done by saying that. And he said to me, look at the scene, look at what's going on, look at the contour of the picture. It starts off with a young boy on his own, which we're telling the story of his solitude. And we want to keep that pretty small, you know. There's lots of tight shots on him, his face, what he's shaping a piece of wood, he's looking after his dogs. It's all about him and his solitude. So, you know, keep it small, keep it intimate. But then, as the scene progresses, you get to this point, and there's this shot where he rides his bike and he gets up to the top of the hill. When he gets to the top of the hill, there's this beautiful panoramic view where the camera sort of sweeps up over his head, and you get this view of this sort of Spanish landscape at sunset. Beautiful. And again, remarkable insight from Michael. He said, pretty much certain that the director spent all of his money on that shot. Like, that's all of his budget's gone on that shot, and that's what he had in mind. He set the whole thing up to shoot about that time of day so he could get that exact shot. So he's probably going to have an issue with that scene more than any other. And he said something he does routinely is where he knows where those money shots are, he might also include some other less important cues so that they'll go through fairly untouched because they keep coming back to the really important cue. Again, just another sort of insightful tip for budding composers, because, you know, these are all the trials and tribulations, if you like, of doing the job. Anyway, in the end, he said, so really big there, but then it cuts very quickly back to him shaping a piece of wood, just him on his own, and then the cue ends and he goes back to the family. He said, so, you know, you haven't written a note yet, but you've got a few key sync points that you need to hit as you go along. And what you need to do is you drop a marker on your timeline, not just roughly in the right spot, on the exact frame. And you drop your marker there, and then you keep going until, you know, you've identified all of the key sync points throughout the scene. And even every edit. He said there's an awful lot you can do in order to make things sync. So what I do now is I kind of have major sync points, which I color in red. And then I have sort of less important but possible sync points in amber or a yellow color or something, just so I can see visually exactly the things that I want to hit and things that might be nice to hit. And then he said, you know, you have to solve the problem of how you get really big in the queue and then how it drops down really fast afterwards, like how you're going to do that. So anyway, with all of this in mind, a 20-minute conversation with him, I learned probably more than I learned in 3 years at university. I went away and I did exactly that. And I dropped the markers, and he said, you do little tempo changes throughout the cue in order to make it sync, but only small enough that the ear can't detect them. People aren't thinking that things constantly change in time, but changing by half a BPM 8 bars earlier means that something now finishes exactly on the beginning of the bar instead of on beat 2. And then it has more of an impact musically when it synchronizes with the picture. This is how you're tailoring your music to fit exactly the visual. So anyway, I went away, I took my theme, but I rewrote everything. You know, I replayed everything and I reconstructed the cue so it did that shape. And I played it to him afterwards and he went, fair play. I like it. That's probably about as good as you're going to get out of it. But I learned so much in about that 20-minute conversation. And then subsequently the work that I did afterwards, it revised. And, I told Barn all about it the next day. And it completely revised the way we did work to picture. And of course, that feeds into all the film work that we do and TV work where sync is important. TV's slightly different. It depends on the genre and so on. Drama would be fine, but light entertainment, it's a slightly different animal. But where sync is crucial, that's what we're doing these days. So that was a very big change for us.
And in fact, I would also interject and say that something I think I learned from watching a Hans Zimmer tutorial is that depending on how you want the scene to feel, if you want it to be just like, punchy, you hit every edit, you hit that stuff. But if you could also use sound to preempt stuff. He was starting to do stuff where he would actually trigger his cue a frame before it actually changed. A frame. So actually, the music just very, very slightly. You would never notice it to the eye, but it preempts the action. So actually, it makes the scenes put even quicker. So all these tricks that we've learned from effectively composers who've done it, spent best part of 100 years writing the picture, we've been applying now to our work in film and TV, and whatever we can do in games. It's obviously a lot harder in games because you just don't know when that sync point will be. But in terms of just the methodology behind it, it's something which we've definitely taken on board. So what Kevin's question?
Well, another thing to add to that as well is, of course, technology's changed, and even in the last, since we've been doing this in the last 20 years, we've gone from, we always worked with a little movie inside. Initially, it was Logic Audio that we were working in. We now work in Cubase. We always worked that way. Prior to that, when we worked at Sony, we were working with a Betacam and having everything synchronized, using time code and so on. And that was pretty complicated and not anywhere near as easy and immediate as dropping a little movie into your timeline. So that changed for us when we went freelance. But even since then, Cubase accepts more formats, different frame rates and things. It's become a lot more flexible a tool than it ever was in the beginning. So life just got so much easier over the years to work to picture. So that technology as well, the fact that technology's changed so much, it's really changed a lot of the way we work. And when we started as freelancers, we had a big mixing desk, quite a bit of outboard gear, which I know you've got as well, Kevin. You mentioned that. We had some of those things that you mentioned, actually. We had a JV 1080, and then later a 2080, actually, when we set up, and a EMU Proteus 2000, was it?
EMU E6400 sampler.
Yeah.
And the Proteus sound module, actually, which we very rarely used, actually, in the grand scheme of things. We very, very rarely used that. And a Lexicon PCM 91 reverb, which we loved and spent a vast amount of money because we thought that's what we need, the best simple reverb ever. And everything was bounced to a DAT, wasn't it? Before we
I've forgotten that. I forgot that. That was our only way of getting two-track.
It's weird though, because at the time when we were using Pro Tools back at Sony, everything was real time. There was no such thing as a non-real time bounce. Everything had to be exported. If you wanted to export a 3-minute track, you had to wait 3 minutes for it to go through. And so obviously when we first did everything, it felt no difference. But now everything is non-real time. We could sit there, obviously depending on the complex of the track, you can render out a minute track in 20 sequends type of thing. So it did start to speed up things demonstrably. So I'm curious.
There's the whole issue of mastering as well. We weren't doing any mastering at the beginning. That was a whole area of the genre that we knew little to nothing about. It was something that other specialists did do. We never had the budget to do. So it sort of felt like it wasn't really doable. Of course, here we are 20 odd years later, and you know, we do master things that we know won't get mixed or mastered by external engineers these days. But you know, it's not, you never hit the ground running with all the skills and all the knowledge that you need, and it's constantly changing, and the goalposts are always moving, so there's always something to learn, and you're never fully there. It's constantly learning, you know, and I think if you accept that, you're in a much better place than if you think you know it all for sure. Anyway, the last bit was, so that was, how has your process changed, and what inspires you when writing to picture? Do you look to the greats, or find your own style, is strong enough? Go on, Bon.
I would say it's so the question was, what inspires you? Is that right?
Yeah.
So the answer to that question is, well, a few things. First off, what's in front of us, i.e. the pictures. We are predominantly media composers. So everything we're writing for there is an accompanying picture, whether it be a film, TV, game, whatever. It will generally have something to look at. And so from that perspective, it's a question of what's the story behind this? Is what the genre we're working in, and so on and so forth. Have we right from the start of a film, for example, or actually, in fact, of any narrative-based thing we work on, we will spend probably a week, maybe more, maybe a couple, just brainstorming. We come up with a palette of ideas. The first thing we'll do is we'll talk to the director. In essence, general, whether it be TV, film, or games, or pretty much the same person. We'll ask them. But one thing I learned this from Hans Zimmer, is a script can only tell you so much. And in fact, so many times that a script for a TV show or film is actually quite removed from what was filmed. I mean, I remember the first film we did was a German film called Mein Bruder ist ein Hund. And in fact, the script they sent us, which was instantly translated into English, featured scenes which weren't even in the final film. Well, obviously, no one had bothered updating the script to reflect that. So it was a very confusing time. So actually, what we learned, is actually the best thing to do is to ask the director to tell you the story. Because at that point, not only are you getting their interpretation of the story, you're also getting a vibe of what they feel is important about it. Because ultimately, as any media composer, we are serving the picture. We are telling the story. We are audio narrators to some degree. And so it's best to obviously understand what the strongest points of the story are and what they want to convey. And in some cases, I'm going back to my script notion, is what's on the script, what's on the screen. There's a gap somewhere between it. The lighting wasn't right. The actor had a cold. The voice wasn't quite recorded. There was something wrong with the way it was filmed. So the director didn't quite capture what they wanted for the scene. But in many cases, they'll use music to bridge that gap. Some cases, it's like, can you really heighten that emotion? Can we really sell that bit there? Start turning a bit up. Some cases, I might actually say to them, let's not go too far here, because it gets quite into the area of cheese. If you let them, they're like, mate, really, we love that string rise, that emotional love scene. Just make it louder and louder. And they put it so high up in the dub that you can't hear anything else. I'm like, no, let's just be a little bit calmer here. Because that's another thing as well. It's a balancing act between serving the picture, catering for the taste in the person you're talking to. That's another thing which is quite an interesting discussion. It's like some cases we come across working people who have a very certain style of, they love a certain style of music, and they want that music to be on their project. Sometimes it's completely inappropriate, but you have to balance the ideas and go, yeah, this sci-fi game may not suit drum and bass, but let's see if we can find a little element of it which we can add just to appease your particular notions. So first of all, what inspires us? So yeah, first off, it's the story. So from that perspective, it's like, tell me that. So any narrative thing will have you'll have your characters, you'll have your places, you'll have your goodies, your baddies, whatever. And we will start to write motifs. We'll start to write things because we love the classic film way of doing things. John Williams obviously mastered this. Is you writing your things for your characters. I'm sure we can all close our eyes now and imagine Luke's theme as he looks across the two sunsets as they're setting on Tatooine, and you know exactly what kind of tune it is, because you can close your eyes and you can in many cases you can even tell the story. That's actually what I had my back to the television while my daughter was watching something yesterday. It was a Jurassic Park Lego thing, and I said, without even looking at the screen, I know that the bad guy's on screen simply because of the music they've chosen and the voice they've chosen with the character. Because it's like that you're casting low strings, low brass. It's all that all the tropes which have now become ingrained in public lexicon as to how we as composers convey story and emotion. That's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is their reference material. I've mentioned this a little bit by saying what kind of music they're into, but most, unless you're musically trained, it can be very difficult to describe what you want musically. We all have different opinions. Music is such a subjective thing that even all three of us chatting here will have a different taste on something. We'll watch something and go, that would work here, that would work there. And in many cases, everything we do will be perfectly valid, but ultimately we are serving the project. So therefore, we are trying to serve the view of the director and the producer in most cases, and to serve their vision. So in that instance, we say, if you can't describe what you want musically, the best way of doing this is through reference material. And in that instance, we will get a selection of soundtracks or just any tracks these days, a Spotify playlist, a YouTube playlist of ideas, of which we've got to somehow elicit and sort of find the commonalities between them, and somehow apply us with these commonalities and the subject matter of the project we're working on, and come up with an idea which we think somehow ticks all three boxes. So it's a combination of things. And I mean, on a completely, this is, to be honest with you, slightly selfish way of looking at it, I want to put a bit of me in it as well. It's all well and good someone saying to you, how many times we get said, how many times we're asked to, can you listen to this Hans Zimmer score? Can you listen to this James Howard score, this Howard Shore score? Can you listen to, as you said, all the greats? Because everyone knows them, and effectively do something like that. Of course, we can in some way do it, but do you really want that? Do you really want your project to sound like we're aping one of the greats, or do you want to sound a little bit unique? So I will always argue with some, about actually, don't you want your project to have a unique voice? So when someone listens to it, they go, "Oh, that's X," rather than going, "Oh, that sounds a bit like Star Wars," or "That sounds a bit like Super." I'd rather have something a little bit more unique, and this is where you get slightly more a slightly grey area, because then you're sort of, sometimes you can be battling. Because the third thing I think, which is sometimes I think for me, it's like a huge, is a double-edged sword, is temp music. I don't know how much, Kevin, you work with something like temp music, but on anything, they will at some point they will have captured a video, whether it be a game, TV show, to show people what they're working on, and to make it, obviously, to fill it out, they'll find a piece of music to accompany it, and they find something which they think is appropriate, and in some cases, it is perfectly appropriate and it's great. But the downside of that is they have spent X number of days / weeks, maybe even months, listening, watching that bit of footage with that piece of music. And basically, that makes it mean that it doesn't matter what you do. You could be the best composer in the world. It doesn't matter, because it's not that. What you're producing is not what they have spent months listening to. And so, I mean, we would have had feedback where we'd go, yeah, it's nice, but can you effectively make it closer to this, And in some cases, I remember saying, time out, guys, we're close to getting sued here. If we get any closer to what you put on there, it's going to be so obvious we're going to get sued. So we're going to have to say, time out now, and go, like it or lump it. I can give you two examples where this is quite amusing. We did our first Xbox game, not the current Xbox, the first Xbox back in 2003. It was a game called Kung Fu Chaos, developed by friends of ours who left Sony. In fact, they're now called Ninja Theory, and in fact, owned by Microsoft. And the game was 4 little ninja characters effectively beating the shit out of each other on badly recreated film sets from the 70s. And it is wonderful. The sets were sort of interactive. You could interact with them, and they would just kick out each other. And the levels are sort of 5 minutes. They were timed. You could see the camera. It was deliberately supposed to be cheesy as F, and it worked brilliantly. The first demo they did to show people, they had an ash track on there, and the ash track was 180 beats per minute. so incredibly fast. When they came to us, they said, what we would like to do is a score which is basically funk, disco, and kung fu. So we started doing and these are stars which we loved. So this was a brilliant thing to work on. But reality is there was not a single piece of funk music in the whole world which is anywhere close to 180 beats per minute. In fact, the closest I could find was probably 130. So everything we delivered was deemed to be far too slow. Far too slow. And there's nothing we could do to say, and I had to say to them afterwards, going, guys, you're going to have to somehow get this ash track out of your head. It was completely wrong for this. But you spent months listening to this, so therefore you think that the game should be running that fast, everything. Which is, I understand, but you're never going to get that to result. No. Oh, God, Bennett, my daughter's just come to say hello to me. Babcha, can you please come and get there? There you go. Sorry, my daughter's come to interrupt me.
Animals.
She's supposed to not be disrupting me. I'm on my call. Anyway, so excuse me for that interruption.
It happened live on BBC Newsbar. Don't worry about it.
I love that when the woman.
It was a brilliant clip. Yeah.
And the other second example, which is much more recent. I've only got 3 minutes left in this video, so it's a bit quick anecdote. Yeah. Is we worked on a TV show called Dead Pixels. We love it. It's brilliant fun. Second season has just aired on E4 in January. It's a hilarious, brilliant show. Hopefully, it goes on for years. And last, was it September? Yeah, so that's September before last, because before lockdown hit, got a call saying we're really, really busy. We're in the middle of doing a film, another TV show. We're really, really busy. The producer rang us up and said, we're about to go and start filming the second season. And in the first episode, the writer, John Brown, brilliant writer, he has written a scene where the 3 main characters sing the Kingdom Scrolls theme tune. Kingdom Scrolls is the fictitious MMORPG game which all the 3 characters play. And it has them all singing this. And can you write us a Kingdom Scrolls theme tune? And I was like, yeah, no worries, I can do it. I have to do it in the evenings because I'm really, really busy. I can't do it, spend a lot of time on this. The piano only. It's a big fantasy game. So you would normally expect this to be a big orchestral production, live thing. It would all be done properly. I said, fine, I'm going to have to watch on the piano first because I haven't got time for anything else. I'll do this. And I kept going round in circles. And I kept doing, there was like lots of feedback saying, we like it, but. And it turned out the reason there was a big but is because when he wrote the theme tune, he was listening to the Howard's Way theme tune. So he'd written the theme tune for this following the musical pentameter of Howard's Way, a theme tune written by the same guys who wrote Extended theme tune, a late 80s Sunday night BBC One show. Howard Way. So I was like, oh God. So then I had to sort of go back to the start and try to appease this and say, okay, I'm not going to give you Howard's Way for lots of reasons, but I'm going to have to do something which is somehow in the fantasy genre, in the mode of doing this, but with a flavour to appease the fact that the writer has written it around the structure of Howard's Way to appease how it's going to work. And then I wrote an orchestral thing for it later. I'm going to have to stop now because I think we're about to run out on video. It says less than 1 minute left. So that's my anecdote of the day.